IT startup.
Yeah.
It's already started?
We started the recording, but I'm going to
Hi, folks. I'm Munishi Sanyal. Hi, I'm Munishi Sanyal. I started Pan IIT back in 2003 and then went through a journey of 2010. We had the Pan IIT Innovation Summit Series. Then 2014, I took a break for 4 years where I was representing the IIT Madras Research Park. And in 2018, we started the IIT Startups here. Okay, so we've seen a bit of the downturn in the past, and I guess I'm addressing those who are holding H visas. Is that correct? Okay, so you have a few options available. Now, keep in mind that downturns and recessions don't last forever. There is a certain cycle time, but I think according
We lost the voice in between. Something to do with the audio. Can't hear.
okay. How is it now?
Yes, we can hear. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we need to break this into different buckets. Those who are bachelors. Now, my advice to you would be keep your burn rate low, maybe move back to India and bide your time. The money you made will keep you going for a long, long time. The difficult situation really arises if you have children going to school. And that's a very tricky situation. You really have to uproot yourself or whatever. Now, that is a tricky thing. I think Anil will dwell on that. Now, IIT Bay Area is setting up a portal which is going to be for IIT job seekers. And we are going to reach out to senior IITians in different organizations in Silicon Valley. Now, the good thing is there are 15,000 IITians in Silicon Valley, and many of them are in senior positions. So we are going to ask them to connect their HR or recruiting portal to our job site, to our available candidates, so that a person can get another opportunity. Now, I don't know how that works on the visa front. I'm a little out of date on that. Anil will explain that. But at one time, you could switch H visas, but you could not be without an employer for beyond a certain length of time. So that's basically where it is. But we will do our best to help you out and see where it goes. And if there are any questions from you later, I'll take that.
Thank you.
Anil, I'm just handing over to Anil.
Yeah. I think we don't need one. But our laptop is okay. Yeah, thank you, Manishi, and it's really appreciate you joining us at the last minute. That's the good thing about the Bay Area, the IIT alumni. Whenever there's a downturn or some crisis, as a leadership, you guys always have. So really appreciate it. I'm a corporate lawyer, as most people know, and I could never get into IIT. So this is the privilege I get. I'm sure that's with IITians and senior folks like you. My notes were making a joke before you joined that you've seen 10 downturns by now, so we were checking that. Leverage your experience also with that. And the personal sort of journey that you mentioned, which is certainly also very useful in that respect. We have Ramesh reached out to me, a few days ago and said, we should do something about the current situation because it is developing into a crisis. At this time, we have these are minutes.
Introduce yourselves. Yeah, all three of you.
Yeah, I'm going to do the background then go to it. Everyone will be asleep. Should I start again? So Ramesh reached out to me and a few days ago and talked about, the fact that the layoffs and the number of layoffs are affecting fellow immigrants who are on H1. And we've all gone through, having lived in worked in Silicon Valley for a number of years, 20, 25 years now. We've seen these downturns and it's always good to be able to come together and share our experiences. So I was very fortunate and to be able to get Lena and John to join the panel on a very quick short notice. On the phone, we also have my partner Alan House. He's heads our employment practice, and we'll talk about if you are in the middle of negotiating severance or termination with your current employer. One of the laws that you can employers, they know what they're going for. They have a large charge. You need to sort of also be able to get appreciate it.
We have lost the voice again. Sorry. On Zoom, we can't hear you.
Okay, how about now?
Perfect. Like now we can hear. And we don't want to miss on anything what Anil is saying. It's very precious.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a corporate lawyer. I'll start with a quick introduction of myself. I have worked with startups over the last 22 years in Silicon Valley, advised over 3,000. I always start by saying that to get attention. Over 3,000 startups, young founders, building companies, and that's always exciting. As a lawyer, you get as close as you can get to building technology companies, and obviously it's worked well for us as well. And again, when we have a crisis like this, we have to look around and see who all can support the people we work with. And I'll have Lena introduce herself and John and then Alan on the board.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lena Sujan. Now I run a staffing company called Mobile Technologies, but I've had my own journey here since 1992. So I moved to the US on an immigration visa in 92. I've seen several downturns like most of you here. I started my career in technology, did consulting with Deloitte for 10 years, was an independent consultant for some of them, was at Oracle for 6 years, and then started my own company in 2010. Right, coming out of that 2008 downturn, it was a bold move, but since then, I've been able to help a lot of people that have gone through these similar situations that we're facing right now. And there's a lot of learning that I can bring to you in terms of not only how to look for a job, but how to continue to network and grow. And some of the people that we have worked with in the past have actually benefited from a downturn. So it's hard to sometimes fathom that, something bad happening right now could actually be positive in the long run. But I'll give you some examples of when that has happened. And they've had the benefit of expertise from people like Anil and John, who were able to help them with visas, able to help them start their own companies. So that's my introduction, and we'll get into more of some of the useful tips and things after John's introduction.
Thanks, IIT, for having wonderful university. Love the campuses around India, and I'm looking forward to going back to India right at the end of the year. I'm John Bealey. I've been an immigration attorney for 29 years. The URL for our website is onlinevisas.com. It's also a company that I'm the CEO of, and we've developed a technology called visas.ai. It helps us produce visas quicker and better, so we can keep costs down to really help folks in this situation. I want to pair it with Lena's saying. This may be a miserable time for you if you've gotten your been shown the door at your company, but a lot of times it can turn out to be something better. And there's a lot of laws that have happened since you talked to me, OG, which are good to help making these transitions and stay in the United States, continuing to work and continuing to chase your American dream, as it were. So I'll go back to Anil and the other introductions.
Yeah, Alan, if you can hear us, please make a quick introduction. Alan, as I mentioned, is the head of our employment practice and will share his thoughts about negotiating on the severance and employment termination with your employers.
Yeah, Ellen, we see you, so please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Alan House. I'm head of the employment practice at Inventus Law. That's employment law is not the only thing that I do, but I've been doing it for my entire career. and have done it both in terms of deal making, onboarding, exits, of course, either for the employee side or the employer side, depending. And also that has included a fair amount of employment litigation. So you might say that I've been around the block a couple of times and happy to help.
Thank you all for the introductions. Let me start by, let's say, I'm assuming that everyone online that can hear us is an employee that's been laid off or in fear of being laid off and most likely has an immigration-related issue. But in any case, even if you don't reach out to us, there are other issues that you're dealing with. If you're looking for a better job, we can help. If you're looking for negotiating better practice in this market, if power to you and others can help. But in any case, I assume most of the people on are here as laid off.
So there are questions coming online, so I'll start. So thank you, Lena, Anil, and John for joining, and Alan for joining online.
Let's keep the question. I think let's go broad overview.
Okay.
There's a lot of questions that I was engaged.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Yeah, so I think I just want to step back and set what's happening, set the right perspective. Because, right after the Trump presidency, last few months, we've been missing the speech. But obviously, Elon Musk has taken over the entertainment crackdown. But unfortunately, that's taken a turn towards layoffs. And then this spiral into this environment where every company now, every day is announcing layoffs. I don't know, sometimes I feel it's just trying to outmatch each other, just like they were trying to outmatch the hiring and the benefits. So I want to understand from your experience, what is your perspective of what's happening? Is it long-term, deep? Is it companies reacting, overreacting from 3 months ago when you were struggling to find the right people for the same companies? And now you have to help strategize on how to sort of do these perspective of what's happening. What is what happens in the previous time?
So that's a question because we've gone through this cycle many, many times. And I think there was a huge shock factor in 2020 when suddenly everything came to a grinding halt. I can tell you for myself, our company pretty much came to a grinding halt because none of our clients were hiring at that time. So one of the good things we did at that time was start networking and start connecting people to jobs. But then we suddenly realized coming out of that downturn, the economy was doing well, the stocks were doing well, everybody felt cash rich and wanted to hire the right, new projects were announced, new funding happened, lots of companies went IPO. A lot of our clients have gone IPO in the last few years, and we've seen such a huge ramp in hiring from end of 2020 to 2021 that in some ways, I think we were all expecting this downturn. Whether it is the Ukraine war, whether it is the VC funding that seems to have suddenly dried up, or just the fear of what's coming next. Suddenly we see that actually, if you look at it, some of the companies have no reason to be chopping jobs. Some of these companies are profitable, some of these companies are doing really well, and they're actually taking this opportunity to wait out the people that they anyways would have laid off. And companies go through these cycles and then they take the bottom 10% and they call it annual reviews. At the end of the year, there's annual reviews and people get laid off, but nobody pays attention to them because they happen in 2 seasons. Most companies don't do it at the same time. Most companies don't announce it in such a big way. So in some ways, it is a standard thing that happens every few years. It just happens to be happening at the same time as the war and all of that. So the impact and the emotional fear that people have is greater. One of the things I want to point out, I'm having daily conversations with CIOs, CTOs of companies, and they're all saying, hang in there. We're all going to be hiring next year. So right now, coming out of the downturn, coming out of the pandemic, a lot of hiring happened, and now a lot of laying off is happening. But every company right now is basically taking a pause on hiring. They're evaluating their true needs. They're evaluating their plans, and they're all working on projects that they're going to be kicking off next year. So the jobs are coming. the challenge becomes, how do we survive from now to the job? Each one has a limit capability of allowing us to stay here. So my team and I, we're actually working with a lot of different people. We're just getting connected to the IIT group, but we've done this in the past and we're connected. We have a huge network. Like I said, I've been in the Valley and I walked into this room and I knew people already. And we're talking to senior management, and there are still jobs out there. There is, even if they're announcing layoffs, they're still hiring. It's a really weird way of looking at things. They may announce 10,000 people getting laid off, but they're hiring 200 engineers across the board. And those are the jobs that we're going after. And those jobs are actually happening through network, through connection. So the fact that you guys have such a huge network is really to the benefit. I would actually request all of you to, if you're looking for jobs that will then allow you to do a transfer, reach out. You'll be able to get our contact information, send an email to me, send me your resume, and we'll leverage our network to connect you to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment. So let me actually jump into there are a lot of questions coming.
Yeah.
So great assessment. I think one thing which needs to be communicated very clearly to people online, folks affected haven't been always bottom 10%. I think I can speak from my organization. There are a lot of reassessments of the priority, which is where highly skilled individuals have been impacted, not because of anything other than the reprioritization of the company. So I wanted to kind of make that very clear, because there are some.
I think what's happening is it's just a negative environment. Part of the political and economic and headwinds from the war, all sorts of things.
Yeah. I think we are not.
Yeah. Or one company or one individual. That
Absolutely. It's, macro environment is beyond our control. I think that's something we want to acknowledge, that there's a highly skilled pool of people who are ready to be available. And that's it.
And I want to restate that, reiterate what Manishi was saying, you just have to survive. And it's a large country, there are opportunities all across. And that's what I think the point Leena is making, there's opportunities still in this market.
Yeah.
Even if you're a bachelor, stay here. I think you'll find jobs, you'll find opportunities. And let's get into the heart of it, right? I mean, to John, who's the star of tonight, in talking about, give us a sort of, if you're on an H1 and now you're facing a layoff, give us an overview of what are your options, right? What you'll be thinking about as next steps.
Yeah, let me do that. I want to do one thing to bounce off of Leena. They say that one man's treasure is another man's, one man's trash is another man's treasure, right? What happened in 2008 and 9, or in that downturn, I represent lots of staffing companies, right? And staffing companies held up the economy during that time. The big companies laid off employees, right? And they wanted to lose the benefits. They wanted to do all this other thing, but the economy still needed tech, and it still does now, like it did then. And the staffing companies are a good place to go. And you have the staffing company. I have staffing companies that are salivating right now for the layoffs. They want these workers. They have jobs and they have projects for them. And so give your resumes, keep it coming. All right, so now that we said that there's still something you can do and you should stay here, let me take you through what you need to know. Okay, so the first thing you need to know is during the very end of the Obama administration, the last 8 days, a law was passed that gave a 60-day grace period after you were terminated. Prior to that law, which was 2016, I guess, maybe even 2017, it was the very end. Yeah, 2017, because it went into January 20th. It was just when your visa was over, it was over, right? So what it means now is you have 60 days from when you're terminated or laid off, unless your visa was going to expire within that 60 days, then it's the expiration date. So whatever's shorter, right? Okay, so another interesting thing is you can have conversations with your employer, because if you're on an H1B, and you may know this, your employer is responsible to fly you back to your home country, to which they don't want to do. right? Unless they just really hate you, they want you to be able to stick around and find another job. So they can play with that date of when you're really terminated. You could have some unpaid leave of absence, you could have paid leaves of absence, you could take holiday, whatever it is to get that date longer and longer. But you have that 60 days to file another H1B. So know that first, okay?
So the 60-day clock doesn't start ticking until the termination date.
Till the
So you
termination
can play
date.
around with the termination date.
You can play around with the
Issue
termination
of
date.
severance, you just extend the severance period as.
So so let's talk, there are some specific questions. So let's take an example. Let's say I got terminated on 14th of November,
Right.
and I have 3 weeks of PTO, and my company gave me 10 weeks of severance.
Okay.
Okay. So can you, based on this information, can you advise all the viewers on what would be the exact date by which your H1? So 14th November, 3 weeks, 10 weeks.
Okay, so definitely the 3 weeks. Paid time off means that termination isn't until the end of that. Now, severance is the interesting part, right? So I think I would have conversations with HR, if they would, to say, instead of giving me a severance package, just extend my end date, right? I don't have to come to work. I do have to come to work, whatever, but give my end date to when you're going to stop paying me. Don't make me end earlier if that's possible. Now, maybe it isn't because of benefit packages or whatever, but if you are in a company that can have some flexibility, it's not when you stop getting paid, it's when you stop working, right? So they can play with that date. So it can be as long as they want. It could be at the end of when the severance was going to be.
So the way to do that is to say that my termination date is not November 14th.
Mhm.
My termination date is 3 months from there,
Whoever says
but I don't get any severance, right?
Not 3 months. No, so we should.
But that 10 weeks.
Yeah, so no, I want to use that example, right?
Right.
Because people heard that example. So let's not go loosey-goosey on it.
So under your.
So 3 weeks, November 14th plus 3 weeks is guaranteed.
Yep.
As per what John said. And then what John said is that 10 weeks of severance, you try to talk to your HR and say, can you actually officially calculate a date until employed,
Right.
which is 10 weeks after that.
Correct.
You're paying me anyway.
You're paying me anyways. And then 60 days starts after that. So
That's correct.
60 days, another 2 months starts after that.
So what you're saying is that I'm not getting any severance. I will terminate on the date off, but that 10 weeks is my severance period, but officially my employment.
Okay. So I have a follow-up question on this, and this is
Yeah,
an,
I just want to clarify one thing. The 3 weeks, make sure you're not getting that paid out, your PTO. Because your employer will pay you out on the last day, instead get paid out.
they will always pay you out.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. If you want to use the number 14.
Plus 3 weeks. Yeah.
Tell your HR, tell your employer not to pay you.
Dharmesh, we can't hear Lena well. Maybe it's muffled, I guess, something.
So let me tell you how this practically looks, right? This is really important because we can tell you all these strategies and you're going to go mumbo jumbo. What do I do? This is how it looks, right? So when you put an H1B petition in and they're asking what your status is, you're putting in you're on an H1B. And then if that's it, right, then they could have what's called an RFE, request for evidence, where they say, prove your maintenance of status, right? And this is where people put their paychecks out, right? So if they try to say, I'm just going to put my paycheck in because it's severance, they may say that's not enough. Show us that you were actually employed, right? And that's why you want to have that second document that you'd say, okay, HR said my last date is on the date of when my severance, call it that, ends, but I'm not having severance. So that was what Anil's strategy is. So what you're really doing is creating a document that what happens if I put this petition in and they ask me back this question, right?
I think let it finish its own story and then come with all the questions together.
Right.
Actually, there are quite a lot of questions.
Cover all of them.
Yeah, I promise you we'll cover it and there'll be some left over, right? Yeah. Okay, so that the first thing to know is that you have that time, right? So I think this is the way to think about it. This is what everybody on here wants to know. I didn't know I have 60 days. Now I know 60 days. I didn't know when my 60 days started. Now I know how I can deal with that. Now I know I can have a conversation with my company.
Sorry,
Okay.
John, but one thing in terms of that example, if
Mhm.
you have 3 weeks of PTO, accrued PTO,
Mhm.
the point Lena was making, I just want to make sure that's important. Yeah. Negotiate with your employer so that you're not getting paid at the termination date. Otherwise, you don't get the three. You
Right.
can't have the
Right.
payment because then the
That's-
termination date becomes. the
That's
number.
what I was trying to clarify.
So
You
that's
want
what
your
you're-
paycheck, because again, you're gonna give them a paycheck,
Yeah.
right? And then you're gonna explain that paycheck with the next piece of paper, right? So you don't want a lump sum, you want it to paid out over time, because the longer it's paid out, that you're staying under employment, that 60 days is
There
being
is a
told.
follow-up question,
Yeah,
which
so-
comes up.
Yeah, so let's have this conversation. We'll get to that.
I'll bring in the question much later, okay?
Yeah, but, yeah, okay, that's fine, that's fine.
So one thing, again, to very important, because as you're talking to employers, it's important to remember. But as soon as you are terminated, right, the employer does not owe you anything other than your paycheck, right? And then what happens, whatever you do with the immigration is between you and your new immigration lawyer, right? Your employer is out, right? So this is the time to negotiate and understand what you need to go back with. So if that means you need a paycheck that shows 10 weeks going forward, you need to negotiate now. You cannot get paid, have the money in the bank account, have a termination and your paycheck that's out. Because then after that, your employers cannot even help you at that point. That's the termination date of record. Right. So, John, why don't you just play us?
Yeah, I'll
forward
keep
with
playing
that?
it forward, right? Because I want to give you your examples and how you're going to look at these things from your perspective.
Right.
Guys. Okay, so you know these dates, 60 days, how to protract 60 days, how to have a conversation with your employer. If you have any questions, as Lena said, we'll have our email addresses and things like that. You can ask us. We're glad to talk to you about that. Glad to talk to your new employers, I'm sorry, on how to look at that. All right, so that's the H1B. And what I talked about is, you know, it may be hard to get on with the big companies right now. They're in a stall mode. But if you didn't know it, there's an entire other industry that is going to be doing stuff that you guys do for a living with these staffing companies. And what they're doing, think about it like this. The big companies are trying to protect their investment. A lot of them are publicly held. They're looking at profitability, right? But they still have projects. So what they're doing is they're cutting their paying employment benefits and things like that. So the staffing companies are coming in and they're grabbing the projects from the same companies, right? And then you're just going to change your employment to another company. You may even be back on the same project because you have that skill set, right? So don't give up. Think of it like that. And those are the types of companies you want to look at. Lena knows them. I know them. Again, you can email us and send us those resumes. I have lots of clients that are looking for you right now. I promise you that.
On that note, sorry.
Yeah.
So if you are at a large company, got laid off,
Mhm.
you go into a third party
Mhm.
that's a vendor to look the place.
Yeah.
In terms of the salary, right?
Mhm.
Is there can you start on a lower salary? What is the basic
You
requirement? there?
can, but okay, so here's how salaries work, and then I'm going to talk to you about how you transfer.
Because I'm
age.
assuming the third party is going to pay you
100%.
lower, but you want to make sure it's within the confines of what immigration will allow.
Maybe, maybe not, and it might be okay just so you can stay in status, and I'm going to tell you why that's okay. All right, so the first thing is there's a thing called prevailing wage. Anybody on an H1B knows what that is. That's a minimum wage. So it's not like just some company will say, well, I'll take them for pennies on the dollar because they're desperate and they're out of work. They have to pay the prevailing wage, right? Now, what the problem of the staffing company model is, there is a staffing company that may be a vendor and then a third party, but so their margins can be low, but they may be willing to take on all this other work because they're going to make it with volume, right? So you might take a pay cut, but you may not. Now, if you have to take a pay cut, that might be okay, and here's why. So with the H1B, back in the Clinton administration, they added portability. It's the only non-immigrant visa that works like this. What I mean by portability is when you apply for a new H1B, you can start working for the new company if it's substantially the same job. So if you're a software developer at Google, and then you go become a software developer at a staffing company that has you back at Amazon or something like that, but you're still a software development, that's close enough. Software developer, that's close enough. Okay, so you can start working at the receipt notice. All right, that's pretty quick. Here's the time frame on it, just to let you know. So H1Bs have a prerequisite called a labor condition application, or LCA, and a notice of posting. That takes about 10 days to do that. So what we do as immigration attorneys is we file the LCA, we get all the information together, and we try to file the I-129 and the package of materials
right after that day comes. So we're trying to aim for anywhere from 10 to 14 days to get it in. And then it's about 3 days to get the receipt notice. So you're looking at about 2 weeks, right? That you can start working again. Unlike the other visas where you'd have to wait for approval or file premium processing to get it.
So this is 2 weeks from your new employer submitting an application?
Yes. Well, yes,
Yeah.
starting the LCA, I-129 and receipt.
And does that have,
You don't have to have premium processing because you can do it at notice. You don't have to pay the extra $2,500 fee, right? That's a really cool thing that the other visas would have to do that. So if you're on an O visa or an L visa, you're going to have to do premium processing at the new place. And I'll tell you how to do
and
this.
all of that 10 plus 3 days has, in the 60 days you have for the transition?
Yes. Well, no, not all of it. If you can file the I-129 component prior to the last day, then it will be pending.
So let's say December 1, let's do a simple, December 1, you have until January 30th.
Mhm.
Get all of it.
Okay.
Working backward. What
So-
are the days that you should be looking at?
If your very last day of 60 days is January 30th, then you need to file the H1B package, not the LCA, which would be 10 days before that, on January 29th. Right, so the day before you FedEx it, and you get there, and that would be fine, and that can happen that way. So that's why negotiating with your HR for a day or two might make all the difference in getting these jobs. But again, your strategy in trying to find these jobs might be not to look at another big company. Let me do a staffing, even if I take a pay cut. Here's why. You can leave that staffing company and go to another company after that. Same process, right? So you can go in, help those guys out for a little bit. Economy turns back up, the big companies want to hire again, you're going back over there, you learned some skills, you made some money, you didn't have to leave, right? So that's
Actually, I
very
want
possible.
to point out, sorry, I'm interrupting.
Sure.
We're not talking to minimum wage people. We're
No.
talking to engineers, we're talking to skills.
Labor.
There's my experience, there's not going to be a significant pay drop if you from a full-time job to a consulting job. I highly recommend looking at professional services organizations. They're still hiring, and I can connect you to them. Looking at becoming a sales engineer. You will be surprised at how many engineers have been very, very successful as sales engineer. And people don't think of that. I've actually gone from being a consultant at Deloitte to being a sales engineer at Oracle, just because I wanted to get a full-time job and I didn't want to go traveling every week to my new client. Become a technical program or a technical project manager. You're still using all your engineering skills. So there's a lot of ways for you to pivot to have the same job. And since there is engineering involved, the title for your new will still qualify you for the visa that you need for the next filing.
So I just want to make sure, because that's an important point. A lot of people were probably looking at different options. What are they looking at? What are the parameters in which engineer to engineer is broad enough, software engineer to sales engineer? What is the overall, just an overview of what they should be looking for?
Thank you. I love the question, and here's why, right? So what we do as immigration attorneys, a little different than others, is we write briefs up front. What we do is we identify issues and we tell immigration, here's how the courts have looked at it. And I always start out with the educational requirement, because there's a case that came out that said that that engineering is the degree, not computer science engineering, not mechanical engineering, right? So an H1B company can say, we want an engineering degree, and is not required to have the subspecialty. We've seen immigration kill people on that before. The danger part that companies make mistakes is they ask for computer science engineer, right? But you don't have to, you can just ask for engineering. So there's strategy that goes into this. So if you guys are looking at that and you don't think it's a max, give us a call. We'll help your employer. New employer may not know that, right? We're lawyers, we're nerds about law and going into cases and stuff like that. Companies sometimes don't know those little nuances. They don't know they have that protection, but an engineer is the degree. Subspecialties are not requirements. And that
So
was
when
a
you're
big thing.
negotiating with your, I don't know how much you're negotiating, but when you're discussing an offer with your new employer, ask for a JD. Make sure that JD falls within what could be portable for H1 perspective. Right?
That's right.
But it could be a very broad description.
It can be,
It
and,
should
and,
be.
and that's the key. Well, the key is trying to make it substantially similar so you can start working on day one. So what I would do if I had a case of an engineer going to a sales engineer is I would line up duties that they're the engineering part, right? So a sales engineer is the smart guy that comes in and says, here's what the technology is going to do to you, because the sales guy didn't know anything about it. They just opened the door, right? So the engineer comes in and acts like an engineer, but then another engineer builds it, right? So you go from being the developer to being the explainer of what the developer does, but you're still using your engineering degree. And what we as lawyers have to do is focus on the right things, right?
But to Lena's point, if you're transitioning to a sales engineer, you should negotiate with your employer that the description includes engineering, right?
Right.
Your core expertise in engineering.
Make sure
Less
that,
sales and more
yeah, make sure that your company has good attorneys that know this sort of stuff, right? Have that conversation if you can, or have that conversation with their HR that has it. You know, a lot of the lawyers will have free strategy sessions about this stuff. That's what we do.
And you advise employers also, right? So when
100%.
your employers ask you for, is it okay? What is your advice to employers that, you know, having a broad description is okay? And because when employers are talking to employees, they're also worried about whether they complies with the law. So what is your feedback?
Yeah,
or
so
advice to-
that's probably not the right way to say it, Anil, but it is, it's specific, but it knows what to focus on, right? So, you're really looking at every case sort of like a snowflake, right? So if I have a computer developer and I want to be a software engineer, what I'm going to do is look at their degree and look at the job titles and make those job titles from job 1 and job 2 as similar as they can be, right? So while that is broadening it up, I'm going to be making specific points. Does that make sense? So that's
And,
really getting into the weeds.
So I think
There was actually, you talked about many different types of visas. One of the questions which somebody is asking is about type B2
No,
visa.
so we'll talk about all of those.
Yeah.
H1, which is the most important right now. What are the things that we can do to protect the H1? So let's complete that process, and we'll talk about the other options and go deeper into those
Yeah.
options.
So I think we nailed most of that, right? So you want a specialty occupation that is substantially similar to the one you had before, if you're going to be going from starting that new job, right? If you feel that it's not close enough, be careful, right? Because if you don't get it approved, then you're going to have work without authorization, right? So those need to be connected up, and you want to have somebody that does this for a living be able to, sign off on that, would be my opinion. So that's what we're really talking about here. And again, when we're talking about maybe taking a pay cut, as Lena said, prevailing wage keeps that from being too low. I mean, the Bay Area prevailing wages are really, really high. I mean, they can't undercut it by too much. I mean,
So to summarize the H1 options, you have 60 days. The 60 days starts from the termination date. You
Right.
try to negotiate with your employer to extend that termination date.
correct.
Financially, it may be the same if they're paying you severance or PTO. As long as you're willing to give up any severance at the end of the period, you can extend the termination date to the end of that severance period.
Yeah.
And then you can find another job within the scope of what you're doing as an engineer.
Yeah.
As long as you're getting the minimum wages, minimum meaning the prevailing
The
wages.
prevailing wages.
And by the way, it doesn't have to be in the Bay Area, right? Right now, you're trying to survive and keep a foot in the door. So it could be anywhere else, and the prevailing wages could be much lower in a different jurisdiction.
They could be, and we're seeing so much remote work, you may never leave. You may be working remotely at your house for Meta today, and then be working remotely at your house for a staffing company that's in New Jersey that has a project in Kentucky, right? And you may still be in your living room the whole time. People just need projects done right now. And to add to one last thing is you can move from company to company as long as they're substantially similar. So you don't have to worry about, oh my God, I'm leaving this great Bay Area giant company that I've worked for a long time and I love. You could get back there again when they start hiring again, or to another one, and just take a hiatus at one of these and not have to leave America and all of that stuff.
How are prevailing wages determined by the residence of the employee or the employer?
Where the job is.
Where the job-
So here's the funny thing, we work with this all the time, right? So we have companies that will leave.
So I meant in the context of a remote employee, right?
Right.
Where is the job in that perspective?
Right,
in that
so
context?
if it's solely, I was gonna go to that, because we don't usually solely put them as remote employees. A lot of times we'll have the company's location, because they'll want them to come in from time to time, and the remote location, and sometimes the staffing company. Now, when you start putting lots of addresses, you got to pay the highest prevailing wage. So that's always a strategy between lawyers and companies on what it's going to be. But if it's remote solely, it's going to be the home address.
Yeah, but for all practical purposes, because we deal with this all the time, we have clients that'll say, I want to hire a back-end engineer. And if you find me the right person here in the Bay Area, this is my band for what I'm willing to pay them. If you find them in the Midwest or somewhere else. So the companies and the HR have already determined, based on the location of the candidate, what they're willing to pay. It's the exact same job, exact same skill set. It's just your cost of living impacts what they're willing to pay.
Yeah, again, I'm just looking at if I were in H1 and trying to figure out the best way to stay here. I think it's an important question. Let's flush it out. So what does that mean, right? I mean, do I have to relocate to Indiana so that I can be hired by an Indiana lawyer, employer at a much lower rate, and that's okay? Or can I sit in remotely and still, because it's
I think it all depends on your personal situation. If you're sitting in the Bay Area, paying Bay Area prices and living in this cost of living, and you're taking up a job with a company that's based in Indiana, like you said, hold on, because, sorry, I just want to make sure. You're going to get paid a lower salary, but you'll keep your job and you'll keep your H1 and you can change your job later again. If you want to relocate to be in a lower cost of living because that's where you found the job, you can do that. If you live in a lower cost area and getting a job out of the Bay Area, then that's to your advantage.
so again, I would keep the personal sort of situations out only because my assumption is that if you are struggling to keep your H1, that's your focus. You have enough savings to last you 6 months, 12 months, but you're here, right? So getting the job and transferring your H1 is what your focus should be, not the best job right now at the highest price.
Correct.
Even if there's this disparity between the cost of living, all that. So let's keep that on the outside. Just want to make sure that we're thinking it properly. So where are the jobs? I mean, I know, and we all know now, we live in a technology world. So all businesses are technology businesses, right? So just Google is not the only technology company. FedEx is a technology company, Nordstrom is a technology company.
There are lots
and their
of
headquarters
jobs
across the country. So are you seeing other job opportunities for technology engineers?
So I'm sure anybody that's looking for a job is going on LinkedIn and seeing these lots and lots of lists. There's a lot of people compiling
Can you
lists.
provide a brief summary of where else they should
There's ed tech jobs. There's ed tech companies. There are fintech companies. There are e-commerce companies, retail companies in their engineering departments. They are hiring right now. And again, feel free to reach out to me and I'll connect you to some of these because we're working with them. Some of them we are not directly working with, but we have network. We know people. Your IIT fellows can help connect you to these companies. The jobs are there. Whether that job is a contract job or a full-time job, that's a different thing. Again, you have to be very careful. Your best bet right now is going through a network or somehow getting connected to a person. Everybody out there is willing to answer this question. Hey, reach out to anybody on LinkedIn and say, I see these 5 jobs listed on your website. Are these real? Because there's a lot of companies have job listings that they have paid for. These jobs are listed on LinkedIn, but these jobs may not be actually available. Those listings are just sitting there. Feel free to reach out to recruiters within these companies. Feel free to reach out to people that work with these companies, their partners, their vendors, and they can find out where they are. There's a whole list, and again, reach out to me. I have a whole list of companies right here in the Bay Area. Khan Academy is hiring. Yelp is hiring, Udemy is hiring, Coursera is hiring. Lots and lots of companies are hiring. They may not be hiring for the role that you're looking for. That's where how do I negotiate and how do I get to the right level of the job that I need to be? That's where the personal connections and the network comes in.
So be creative and understand what the requirements are for transitioning, porting over your H1, right?
Right. And I know John can speak to, and Anil can speak to, maybe there's opportunities to form your own company at this point.
And we'll talk about it. I just want to preempt.
So I wanted to add one thing about the jobs. So I think there's a lot of jobs in semiconductor space because of the investment, which actually it's become a strategic angle for US government. So a lot of big companies are building, for example, in Ohio, Intel is building a massive plant. I'm sure there are tens of thousands of jobs there. There are multiple venture-backed companies on semiconductor side, which have fundings of hundreds of $1 millions. So one other strategy people can use is to look at all the funding, which recently companies have announced, and they actually go out of their way to announce that. And obviously they are going to build that. So the question follow up on that, Lena, I always have is, do startup companies, are they flexible to hire H1B? Can you comment on that?
That's actually a very interesting question because they're open to hiring H1B. Again, that's where your negotiation skills negotiation skills of one of us or your personal connections comes in. You will always find companies like ours who are willing to bring you in on an H1B, and then you can still work with the same company that wants to hire you. A startup that's not willing to do H1, they'll bring you in as a contractor till they have an open headcount, and then they can convert you, right? A lot of companies right now, whether startups or mid-sized companies or large companies, they still need talent. They need top tech talent. That's where this group is. If they don't have a headcount, there's nothing they can do about it. But that's where, as John was saying, companies like mine come in. We're staffing companies. We can bring you in. You can go back to the company that wants to hire you as a contractor. When their headcount opens up in 2023, you can go back there doing the same job as a full-time employee. And that is a conversation you can start now. And a lot of startups are willing to do that.
So picking up on that, John, immigration law, again, we have to be very clear about that, right? I mean, contracting, is that okay for an H1 and does that have to be?
Yeah, let me explain that, because it's important how you say that, right? You can't be a 1099 contractor.
No.
That's not what you're saying.
No.
So what Lena's saying is, if you go to a staffing company and you say, my company would like me to work for them, then the staffing company can negotiate a statement of work, an SOW, with your previous company to have you go in as an employee of the staffing company right back into your same project. I'm not sure how often that will happen under these situations, but my prediction would be Meta isn't going to stop being a company, right? Google isn't going to stop being a company. They're just getting rid of employees, right? So they're still going to have these same projects they want to do. And this is an opportunity to actually bring a project to a staffing company. And you might be able to negotiate a better wage for yourself by saying, I'll bring you my company right back in. And I tell you, these guys love the logos, right? So if you can take your Meta or Google to a staffing company and bring them in there, they'll be very happy to do that. So then they become the employer. They then have an employment agreement with you. They sponsor your H1B, and then they place you at back at your previous company. That's a possibility. That's what contracting means. I want to also mention one other thing. You only have 60 days. So don't look at the Sunday want ads of the major newspapers. The reason you don't is that's where we put our perm ads, right? That's where the green card ads go, where we have to prove no American is willing or able. So nobody ever advertises there for real jobs. They don't. The only ones in there are bigger. So you're calling them up and they're like, I can't take H1Bs. And then you're getting all depressed because you've gone one after another.
This session being recorded, just.
No, it's not. I'm telling you, it's not illegal. Nobody would pay what it costs to be in the San Francisco Examiner's Sunday deals. That's not where the real job is. But we have to, under the law, put them there. That's the Sunday paper. We have to put them twice. So all immigration attorneys are paying exorbitant amounts of money for their clients to be in these Sunday papers, and none of those jobs are really intended to be hired, right? So it's just how they sample the job market. So look into more specific types of publications where the real jobs are.
I
right?
actually made a list of where you should be looking
There
for
you
jobs
go.
right now.
Let's go to that.
That's a great idea.
Network. Whether it's your IIT network or
Yeah.
people you have dinner with at the last party or whatever, Diwali parties, just call them up. And everybody's open to taking that call and saying, hey, how can you help me? Who can you connect me to?
One second, I just
post
want to
on
add to that.
social
Sorry,
media.
one thing. Network, we all know that. The key here is, we've all been through these, right? And I from my personal experience, I can tell you, we kind of freeze.
Yeah.
Where we say, wait a minute, I have kids going to school, I have a mortgage, I can't go back. All of these things, we've invested so much of our life into this.
Yeah.
So don't be shy.
Yes.
Everyone around you is going through it. Everyone here is very supportive of it. It's not you personally. It's nothing bad about you. So be shameless in the sense that we will not see that as being shameless.
Yeah.
We will see that as someone who needs help, and we've all been there. So be network, but with the
Yeah.
very clear, open conscience that everyone here is support, not to blame anybody here.
Yeah, if you
And that nerdy guy just hates network.
No, that's what I'm saying. So it's,
You
Yeah.
leverage people like me for your network. I mean, if you connect with me, if you don't want to connect with 10 people, connect with me and I will connect you to the people you need to be talking to. Like,
Because of COVID, face-to-face meetings are almost disappeared.
I think again, in a good way, they're nerds, but they're also very arrogant that, I should need to have to go. People should be coming to me. You've gone into this. I am an IIT and I should be.
I think that IIT is very strong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because among the best.
And it is.
But, they got to come out of their shell and do it.
All I'm saying is exactly, come out of your shell, the next 6 months, just find a way to hang in. You'll get back to your big jobs and your, free grocery laundry and free chef meals. Just find a way for the next 6 months to stay in. Everything will sort of roll
yeah,
itself.
but let me go through
Yeah, I
this.
wanted to go through the list, yeah.
So one of the quickest ways to
Yeah.
get attention
Yeah.
is post on social media. On your LinkedIn, there's a little logo that says open to work. I mean, as simple as switching and saying open to work. I see people who I've known for a long time. They've been VP of this and that. And right now I see them posting, hey, I got impacted. I'm open to work. As simple as that. Reach out to, obviously, join organizations. You already have that. Help your connections find a job. So if you hear of a job that is not the right job for you, maybe reach out within your network and see who else can take that job. Because once you help them find a job, they will bring you in if there's a right opportunity. Reach out to VCs and founders. Tell them how you can help them, and then it might result in a job for you. I tell my team, hiring is a numbers game. My recruiters, I tell them you reach out to 10 people, you'll find one person that's willing to take the job. So I think getting hired is also a numbers game. If you reach out to 10 people, there's one person who can connect you to the right job. So just reach out to as many people as that. And make it easy for employers to find you. Keep your resume updated. Make it easy for recruiters to work with you. I can tell you for myself, somebody will call me and say, I need help finding a job. And I'll say, okay, they'll describe their background to me. I'll find a great job, which I think is a great job. I'll send them a link to this. Nah, I don't want to work at this size company. Then I'll find another one, then I'll send it to them. Oh, I've already applied to them. So make it easy for me to help you find a job. Have clear communication. If you see jobs posted, if you see companies that you're interested in, send me a link to it. If you make the recruiters do all the work, after the 5th job they send to you, they'll move on to the next person they think they can really help.
I think in case of H1B, probably may be lower. I think people are desperate to find a job.
But yeah, but that's exactly what I'm saying. If you first priority is to find a job.
That's
because
what I'm saying.
Words
Yeah.
a qualifying job. So
absolute, such as
reach
you
out
always
as
get
many
this
people as
wrong,
possible
or
and
you
don't
never get
depend
this
on
right.
one source of
So,
help.
such as, are you
So let
stupid?
me go back to Alan who's
Sorry.
on the phone.
Are we
Alan, if you're
asking-
still on, do you have any thoughts to
Picking up,
share?
right
Because
now,
we talked about, and it's very
people
important to
are
understand what
talking
the law requires.
ignoring,
immigration, what looks like.
disregarding, or taking credit for someone else's idea.
Oh, boy. Alan, can you hear me? I don't know if
I was on, I had volume low because there was a noise.
Alan,
Alan, are you there? Alan?
We lost him.
While you're trying to find him.
Yeah, I think we should, yeah.
Okay.
I think Ellen has dropped off and there was somebody, a participant asking something.
Okay.
So please
Let
continue.
me answer this one question because they have 60 days, right? So here's who you don't want to go in with, right? This is really important. Okay, so not all H1Bs get approved, right? And everybody's thinking it's always on the employee, but it's not. The employers cannot be in a position to hire you, right? So what doesn't work? Here's what you want to watch out for. You don't want to be employee one. The H1B, you shouldn't have a company with 0 employees that the first person, because there's an I-129, it's going to ask how many employees there. If they put 0 and they put in an H1B, immigration's not going to approve that, right? Immigration will also not approve companies that don't have a facility, right? I know it's remote, but they need to have a place because there's a lot of investigations going on. There's a thing called the Fraud Detection Unit, right? FDU. So when H1Bs are approved at an all-time 83% under the Biden administration. But I have never seen as many kicked to the fraud detection unit as right now. So they're approving it and they're sending people to investigate. Now we got people working from home and they're knocking on their doors. But they also have companies that just don't exist. That's why they think it's fraud, right? Even though they started in COVID, they got people everywhere, but you have one bite at this and you don't want to get your H1B denied. So make sure there are no less than 5 employees. That's a good rule of thumb in the company that you're going to work for. Make sure that they've been around for a little bit, right? If they're brand new, it's okay. Make sure they're funded, right? So what we would do if it's a brand new company, it's just projecting revenues. Well, maybe they raised $2 million, right? That's okay. It's enough money to pay your salary, pay the prevailing wage. Those are the things to look about, right? And those are the things. And you might ask around, hey, have you gotten your H1Bs approved before, right? So there are some companies that have been blacklisted, some companies that are problematic. So do your due diligence that you get in with a good company, so that that's not going to be a problem and have your visa denied because the company was.
I think the other meat of this, what are the other options? And I would preface that by saying that, and there was talk about B2, so let me just sort of address that. What you don't want to do is in all of this craziness, ever fall out of status, right? Even if you have to go back home in the worst case, you do that instead of falling out of status. And B1 might be what gets you in that trouble. But with that preface, tell us about all the other options and also what not to do.
Yeah, so the B1/B2, right? Those are visitor visas, right? So one is visitor for pleasure, one is visitor for business, and it's called a B1/B2, right? So that's when you file an I-539 and you ask for an extension of time to do whatever. It does not include working, but it does allow you to be here. So you could file a B1/B2, say you're getting up near the 60th day, you file that. The minute you file it, it extends it. It'll take these guys at least 3 months to even turn you down, right? So they could turn you down, but it's going to buy you another 3 months. So in the meantime, then you get another job and then you apply for that job at that point. So then you don't have to leave the country, right? So that's a completely permissible thing to do, and you should do it if you don't want. Now, if you do fall out of status, right, it's not fatal on day one. Know this and put this on your calendar. It becomes problematic at 180 days. Right? So if you're out of status one day, it's no different than being out of status 179 days, right? You're not more out of status 2 weeks or 3 weeks in, you're out of status, which means you shouldn't work, which means if you get a visa approved, you're going to have to leave, go to a consulate and come back in, but you're usually pretty cool, right? And I say usually pretty cool because they have discretion. They have no discretion at 180 hours. And there's a thing called a bar. Right? So if you overstay more than 180 days, you're going to be barred for 3 years, even if you get a job. If you overstay more than a year, you're going to be barred for 10 years. So get the 180th day. And if you're out of status a couple of days, don't sweat it. I've really never seen anybody turn down who then got a visa after they overstayed a little while. Because remember, it was pretty recently that we even got to 60 days. So people were going out of status also.
So this is 60 plus 179?
It's 60 plus 179 until you're barred.
Right.
Right.
So it's not
After
60 plus another up to 179.
Yes. Right. So you're out of status, but you're going to be able to get another visa, but you're going to have to leave the country and go. Don't forget to leave the country. And Hawaii is in our country.
Can we go to Canada?
Yes.
Because we have signed, IIT started to sign the memorandum.
Yeah.
Where one of the selling propositions.
Yeah.
Was, we can do.
Yeah.
We can work out of that.
That's fantastic. So going to Canada, if you're going to Canada, you can work in the United States as long as you can go to Canada. So Canada as a country has its own immigration laws, right? And I don't think any of us are going to touch those, but not going to tell you how to work legally in Canada. But if you leave the United States within that time period, you've resolved US issues.
So just to be sure, you have to leave in the 60 plus or the 179 of 60 plus 179
they're both okay, but one's more okay than the other, right? So if you leave at 59 days, then you've never been out of status, right? If you leave at 61 days, you're out of status, but they won't typically punish you, but you can't change the status, right? So if you file the B1/B2 at 59 days, right, you can then get another H1B opportunity and file that and stay in the United States. Whereas if you go out of status, then you'd have to leave and come back.
So, sorry, so just to be sure, you file your, would you recommend filing your B1, B2 for someone who's running against the 60-day clock now?
Yeah. Yeah, if they're if they're at the very end and they're not gonna get it, file the B1, B2 and buy yourself some time.
And then you leave the country?
No,
No,
that allows you to stay.
What are your thoughts on converting to a student visa?
Yeah, so
100%. That's not a bad idea, right? That buys you time. It's expensive because you gotta go to school.
But you need to have admission and all of that.
But okay, so here's the thing about student
But
visas. though.
community colleges.
But here's an interesting thing about colleges, right? So the that's called an F1 visa, right? Now there's an M1 visa for technical, not like IIT technical, but like more what do you call those? More they're not universities, mechanical, right? Not technical in the sense that we use it in tech. But more of those sort of VOTech type programs. So either one of those is a visa. Now you can do a change of status to them, but you have no premium processing things. And those usually take 3, 4, maybe 5 months. The problem that the universities don't like about that is that you can't start school in the middle of a semester. So they'll issue you an I-20,
Right.
usually have to go out and come back in to go to school, and nobody likes to leave, and consulates are backed up, but consulates put students at the front, right? So, and then we can segue to other visas after this, and I'll tell you about those.
So John, just to repeat, I think you said something earlier, which is very important. At least I did not know. A lot of people. So after H1B, before it just expires, if you do B1, B2, you can extend automatically for 179 days.
No, that's a different thing. Those are two things that are going on there. Yeah, so you file the B1, B2, it may get denied, but there's no premium processing. It will typically take them 90 days as a minimum to make a decision. Now, they may say yes. And if they say yes, then you're going to get 180 days on a B1, B2.
So it's minimum 90 days.
Well, I'm saying that they don't make decisions quickly, right? So don't use 90 as a hard, fast rule, but it's going to buy you time, say another 3 months to then find another visa and then apply for the new H1B.
So, sorry, just to be sure, if you file B1, B2, you're not out of status on day 61? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. And then you can then file an H1B.
So let's say that again.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Yeah. This,
No.
no. File it at 59th blind day.
Hold it in your back.
This is a great option. Yes.
So
Do you take questions, guys?
my first choice is get another H1B company and file an H1B.
Right. Yeah.
If you're getting up near the end of the days, it doesn't take long to file a B1, B2. It's an I-539. There's very little evidence needed. An explanation letter with the form, about a $500. You file that, then that keeps you in status. Now they're either going to approve it or deny it or ask you questions about it. Whether they deny it or ask you questions will take typically 3 months at a minimum. So now you're in status, you bought time, you can now find an H1B company and then file another I-129. So you can have a pending B1, B2, hasn't made a decision, file a new H1B petition, and you just put pending B1, B2 in where it asks for your status. Okay.
So let's say you're day 0, day 1. You put on your calendar day 60, right? When do you file B1?
When you know you're not going to get an
But what day?
H1B.
Yeah, so let's say
Okay,
you're
so
closing
remember,
so day
it's
55.
going to take 10 days minimum to file the LCA. Okay, so you really have 50 days before you're not going to be able to do an H. Okay, so I would go up to day 50. If you haven't got an H then, there's no way you're going to file an LCA and get it back in time. That's when you file your B1, B2. That's a good rule.
I think, yeah, so let's be very clear, we all understand, right? So you're on day 1, you have up to 60 days, but 60 days includes 10 days to file the LCA. So by day 50,
If you don't have,
You don't have
you
it.
don't have an H.
you don't have an employer that's filed your LCA.
Yeah.
File your B1, B2.
Yeah.
extend it. And if you get out of that, you still fine.
That automatically. So just to summarize, because audio issues, right? So that filing B1, B2 is a strategy in case you are not able to find an alternate job. It's a strategy. Everybody should use that strategy. It guarantees you in somewhat loose fashion, some extension to your 60 days. That extension is more or less 90 days because it takes 90 days for them to go through the approval process. They could deny it or they could approve it. If they approve it, you get 179 days. If you deny it, you're still not out of status. And in that 90 days, you could have gotten another job. So it's an automatic way to extend. That's awesome.
There is no reason not to do it.
That's awesome. This is fantastic. I think we should write it somewhere and we should mention it.
So
as
if
well.
I
Thank
can
you, John.
add, as a part of, I mean, my job is HR and immigration. I would only like to say one thing, John, that's a great idea. But I just want everybody on this call to understand one thing. Don't apply for B1 if you're not sure you're going to get a job. And get into that status where you really have to move out. For example, on the 50th day of your grace period, you have found a job. And that's what I think John was trying to say. Like, please be very clear. You have a 60 days grace period. You get the job in the first 40 days, great. You get the job in the first 45 days, perfect. But if you get a job on the 50th day, or say the 55th day, please avail B1 option. Otherwise, don't avail a B1 option on the 60th day. Keep sitting in the country, because John, what I have seen in my career is you typically get RFEs in those cases later on. So be very clear, very careful when you're using that B1 status or application.
Which is do the best you can to get the job, but be very careful about the timelines. Day 50th is the last date that you have to decide to file B1. If you haven't filed the LCA by that time, you initiate your B1.
Yeah, it actually gives an option. Everybody should explore this. This is a strategic option in your back pocket, as John said, which is actually a golden nugget out of this conversation. Fantastic golden nugget. Thank you, John, for making it clear.
And if I may add, the new company which is already giving you an offer would have an immigration attorney, would advise you whether to go for a B1 or not. So John, please correct if I'm wrong, because I know because the people here are desperate to get the job, some of us. Now, if we avail B1 and find that we could not even find a job and our application got rejected, they still even have to leave out the country and exhausted their H1 time.
But you've extended your period for another 90 days, right? Or up to 90
I
days.
understand the fear, but let's keep the fear tempered, right? So the B1, B2, if you apply for it, and it's approved, you actually get 180 days. What you shouldn't do is work until you file and get another visa approved. So that whole period of now working at the new one is gone the minute that 60 days is gone. So let's understand that. So if you file the B1, B2, and then that 60 days gets passed and you file an H1B at that time, do premium processing to get the H1B approved. Don't work on the B1, B2. That's without authorization. You're merely hanging out here, but it is completely permissible to be in the United States interviewing for a job. That is not illegal, right? It's illegal to be on a B1, B2 working at a job, okay? So know that. And so don't start working at the new job on the B1, B2, even if your employer says it's okay. And they will, right? Because they're billing you out, right? So know your rights and talk to an attorney if you're hearing something like that. Oh, it doesn't matter. We can do it this way. It's all fine. They may tell you that, and then you're the one that gets deported. So that's an important
I think
factor.
the point, I think the point the speaker, the person on the online was trying to make, if I can summarize, is if you have an offer, right, even on day 55, talk to your employer before filing the B1, because as you said earlier, even if on day 61 you become out of status, it's not a big deal. As long as you have a job, you'll be able to very easily come back on status instead of complicated by filing a B1. Is that a right summary?
Just, yeah, have a conversation with your company, especially if they have an attorney, that you're on the same page. Do talk to that attorney, make sure that strategy is that everybody knows it, right? So if somebody came to me and said, I filed a B1, B2 already, and I'm still within the window of 60 days, I'd say, that's fine. Okay, we're going to file an I-129. We're going to say the B's there, but we're able to do that. If they say I'm past it and I have a B1, B2, I need to know that it's pending. I'm gonna know they're gonna have to leave the country. But what I would suggest is, okay, they're gonna have to leave the country. They don't have to leave it today. File the visa, file it premium processing, get a consular appointment. We're still within the window. B1, B2 hasn't either been adjudicated or it's been approved. Then go out to the consulate and come back in on the new visa, right? So we're getting very intricate on this. by this time, you should be talking to an attorney. The company probably has one. They'll take you through this. So what I'm telling you guys right now is how it works. But, 10 lawyers are going to look at things nuanced with each other. Some are going to have similar strategies. But what to take out of it is the B1, B2 is a status, right? Not filing anything, no status. If no status, remember the 180th day, 179 and 2 are the same. That after 179, you're barred. So whatever you do, get out of the country before 179, even if you're going to Canada.
Yeah. So I wanted to give a shout out to Vishal who asked this question, and
Thanks, Vishal.
it's a great question. So please keep your questions coming. And I wanted to give a shout out to Tarangita, who is the HR person. She couldn't be here, but Tarangita is also participating in the panel. So thank you, Tarangita, for speaking up.
Very good.
Yeah, just one thought. I mean, you will do everything it takes to get back into another job, in status and all of that. But one of the other things to think about is if your company is letting go of a lot of people, there is a possibility that they're still hiring for their teams in India. So if you can continue to work with that company, be on that team in India, continue to do this job, there is also that possibility that they can bring you back on H1 when things change for them here, which they will always turn around.
I would really like to go on that.
Yeah.
This is really cool. So this goes to another visa. Okay, so guess what? Change is inevitable, but sometimes it works out for the better, right? So say you're in a position, you're in a managerial position in the United States, but you got there after you got your H1 or your F1, you just went into that program, right? Say they send you back to India, right? If you work for 1 year in your company back in India, and the Indian and American company have the right relationship, which is either a subsidiary parent relationship or an affiliate, which means the same people or entities own the same deal. So these big companies have back offices in India and they have those relationships. It has to be the right one, but many of them do. So if you go back and work in that managerial role, then they could, after 1 year, transfer you back on an L. Now, let me tell you what's so cool about that. The L1 visa, if it's for the managerial level, not the L1B, that's just for special knowledge, but the managerial or executive, that's one chunk. If you're working on that as an L, you are likely eligible for the EB-13 visa. Here is the big nugget on that. EB-13 green cards are current priority dates for Indians and everybody else. EB2s and EB3s, which H1Bs have priority dates 12 years from now, right? So you could go back 1 year, come back and get a green card within a year, and instead of waiting forever. So this change in 1 year in India and go and see your family and friends,
Right.
You may be coming back
With 3 months severance.
right with 3 months. You actually might raise your hand and say, send me back, and then I'll come back on the L. And that's a fantastic visa because it leads to the EB-13. And if you know what priority dates, you'll see them. The first category is current. Second category, third category is a gazillion years.
This is great, and I know Dharmesh is smiling, and we're all. So I think the purpose of this discussion is to make sure you understand what all options you have.
Yeah.
And be willing to go back to your employer and say, hey, by the way, employers are also struggling with this, right? The HR teams are struggling with this. They want to do the best. They want to do the best for their employees. They'll be hiring you. They'll be hiring your friends in the future. Nobody wants to really have you on the street. So if you can help them in that discussion and say, to Lina's point, if you have a team in India, I'm happy to go back for a year and let's have a plan of bringing you back on the L1. That will turn out to be really good for you, right? In the long run, if you can structure that around.
Basically, a lot of things could be blessing in disguise, which is how you have to frame it in your mind to be always positive. And 6 months down the line, you might say this was the best thing which happened because it showed you options. Just like John said, you accelerated on your green card path because of this thing which happened to you. Otherwise, you'd be stuck behind in a 12-year-old line, wondering when things happen.
Yeah, so if there's a couple, one of them gets affected, both are on H1B. If the person getting affected go on H4 or file a B1 and B?
Great question. Yes, H4s are a completely permissible thing. Like the B1, B2, you can't work on it, except if the H1B has filed and had the I-140 for the green card approved, you can do H4 EAD. So that might even make you more employable because you're not on an H1B, you're as hireable as an American, right? You can do anything, contract, or whatever. Yeah, for sure. So,
Even better, because there's a question on that.
well, but the B1 in no instances can you work. So this is a case by case analysis. So you got two H1Bs was the Manoj said. So the spouse that is not being let go is not only has an H1B, but has filed their I-140 for a green card. Say they're on the EB2 or EB3, which has the gazillion year wait. So they've been approved and they're still on their H1B extensions, because if you file that early enough, which is by the end of the 5th year, then you can extend and extend and extend until the green card priority dates are current. So those people are the very limited people under the H1Bs whose spouses on H4 can get work documents, EADs. So the B1s can't get EADs, H4s can get EADs. So the facts don't apply to everybody evenly.
So just to be sure, because that's I think Manoj's point. So if you're husband, wife, and one spouse is still hired, the other's been terminated, the terminated employee, if the spouse that's still employed has filed 140, it's actually a better option for the terminated employee to not file B1, but convert to EAD and get
Yes.
better options there.
Yes.
In that respect.
In fact, when, as John pointed out, if you're on H4 EAD, you can actually work for any employer without having the H1
You
sponsored
can
again.
start your own business.
You can
Yeah.
start your own
Yeah,
business.
that's
I was
great.
gonna get to that.
Very
You
good.
can start your own business
Yeah.
and
Your own
your
consulting
legal
company,
team is here
absolutely.
to help.
So
you with
on
that.
that, just
Well,
one.
let's flush it out, because if your
One-
husband, wife, one of you has been fired, the others filed the 140, instead of looking for an H1, you're actually better off converting into it. How long does that take?
6 to 8 months right now for the EAD to go. It's not fast. We're all frustrated with
But
that.
can you start working in that time period? Are you legally allowed to, once you file?
No, you have to get it approved. But if you're talking about starting a company, you can probably put some things in machinations. I represent.
But you don't have to leave the country once you file.
No, you don't. It's just like the B1, B2 then, except it's work things.
So day 2, you can file EAD and you can sit in the country
Yeah.
and then wait for it to come back and start all these other options that are available.
Right. So just to tell you this, if you guys don't know that, I represent about 100 different staffing companies. I wouldn't say a majority of them, but about a third of them are owned by H4 EADs, right? They're spouses of H1s and they run the company, and the H4 EAD company makes all the money in the family. It's not even close. Right. It's not, but you can keep extending them, right?
Plus your date of income also 140 that you, 140. So you're not missing out on the line. Your green card will always be driven by the first 140 you file, right? So you're not missing it.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, DJ. There is an employer question. We have Bharat Rao, who's an employer, and John, this is a very interesting question. So he has an AI startup, which is funded by SF and VA, and great. They have 4 open positions. It's bringing back to the previous question, which we said, or that look for a company that it should be there around for 1 year. So his company has been around for 1 year only. They have 4 employees. He wants to hire IT people. He wants to know, do you think he should be hiring H1Bs and allow the transfer? It's a tricky question.
Well, it's right on the edge. It's a bubble question, right? I told you the best practices is 5. They're at 4. And that's okay. It can be okay. What it's all about, see, it's a question of fraud, right? So what dispels fraud? And what we do that's a little bit different than other immigration attorneys is we give them information, sometimes more than they want, to win whatever point we think they're going to be worried about. We like, what are these guys going to be worried about with this case? How can we answer it up front? So I'm going to tell you, they're going to look at 3 things. They're going to look at when was the company founded, how many employees does it have, and how much revenue did it generate? If I think all of those are light, I'd say, what else do they have in their favor? If you say they've been funded, I would put that in there. I would show their funding documents. I'd say, don't worry about these guys. They're okay. They got the money. They just came out of a Y Combinator and they're great. They've got some buzz. Things that you would never put in an H1B, I would put in there to show them these guys are okay. Okay. So with that one, it's a great example because it sounds like a very bright and a company on the way up. So I think with that one, if they've got the funding, maybe 4 is okay, because 4 is not a magic number. It's not a regulation that says if you have 4, you're going to get denied and 5, you're not. It's just a smart number. to be at 5. But if they have those other things, I think they're okay, or they could just hire one more person.
That's what I was gonna say. So then they're at that five number and the rest 3 they can fill with.
Well, again, just to be sure, the 5 is not a magic number.
It's
You
not.
still have to go through the whole credibility.
It's a
right?
smell test number, right? So it's gonna raise an eyebrow. So if your attorneys are thinking the way I do and saying, let's answer this question up front. It's funny how many immigration attorneys are like ostriches. They just put their head in the hole and they just take whatever their clients give them and they put it in there and they hope that immigration doesn't do their job. Right. So what we're like, let's assume they're going to do their job. Let's assume they're going to be concerned about this. Let's have a conversation with them on paper. We know you're going to be upset with this or worried about it or concerned or whatever. Let's address your question right now up front. That gives us 2 bites.
Can you
But
restate
just
those?
telling Bharat again, sorry, Bharat, since you're the employer and you want to hire people, you're looking for good talent, your other path could also be have those 4 people that you want to hire work for a consulting company and you hire them as contractors or consultants. You're still paying them the same salary. Now it's an hourly instead of full salary. And then a little ways down the line, you can bring them over to your H1.
So there's 2 options. I think if you told me you had a well-funded company with 4 employees, I'd say, could you get one more in as a receptionist? If not, and you had that other evidence, I just put it in up front. I feel pretty confident.
What are the top 3 again? Just from that.
The 3 things that the fraud detection unit's gonna look at. Well, there's 3 that triggered, right? When was the company created, right? How much revenue has it generated and how many employees does it have, right? So the answer to those 3, if they're light, is funding, good client, it's a spin-off of somebody, of a good company before, you had a rock star type of employee. Hey, we got the CTO who was at Meta, as an AI architect, and this guy invented this and that. You talk about those.
Because I'm sure a lot of the first, so what is light in each of those elements? So 1 year, more, 2 years, revenue is 2 million.
I think
That the spend test at 5.
Yeah, I think they will, if you hit 2 of the 3 as being too light, I think they'll throw it over their pocket, right? I think they'll just send it to them and say, what do you guys think about this? So I think less than 5 employees, less than 100,000 in revenue, and probably anywhere from 1, 2, and 3 years, they might have a question mark, depending on what the other 2 answers are, right? So there's nothing wrong with starting up a company and hiring people, but hire some Americans and green card holders first. Your first 5 hires should be H1Bs.
So again, going back to negotiating with your current employer, and this is important if you have a few of you planning some things together. Again, employees are receptive, and almost all your agreements with the large tech companies, we've drafted them. We know they have non-solicitation, right? So it's a good time to actually go back to your employer and say, we might be doing something together and we want a waiver of the non-solicitation. Yeah. Employees would be very receptive. And again, with the plan that we'll probably come back or whatever we build. I have a client, actually, I remember now, and speaking about how, things could turn out to be better, who went out in the last recession, created a company, and their former employer bought that company back. And it turned out to be actually, and he would have never done that, right, if he hadn't been pushed out, and did much better in terms of doing that. But also keep in mind, now's the time to look at your employment agreements, negotiate with whatever is limitations, whatever limit employees would limit in a normal economy, they would be more willing and more flexible to give up to allow you to build your career and continue your business here.
That jumps into the OBs. We talk about
Yes, no, that's what I was getting to. So let's talk about the rest of the options.
So the O visa is for extraordinary ability. And one of the devices, I don't know if I invented it, that'd be very arrogant to say, but I utilized it more than others because I cut my teeth on the O visa on that. And then I moved into entertainers and then it went into tech, right? And so the O visa allowed agent-based petitions, right? And so entertainers have agents all the time. Athletes have agents all the time. Techies don't have agents, okay? But an agent for immigration purposes is different than an agent for, who goes out and gets you gigs and takes 15%, right? So we're holding right now, we have a DBA of our law firm called International Sports and Entertainment Agency, which has as many techies as it has sports and athletes. But we have about 1,000 of them. And where we do is we sit as the agent in the petitioner role. And then that allows the O1 visa holder to have numerous direct employers, including their own company. Okay, so and what that means is they're not going to focus on the company size like they do on the H, right? You can be a brand new company. You can be unfunded. You can have no office, right? All of that under the O, because the O's focus is going to be on how good that beneficiary is, right? And I'll take you through those really quickly. So one is national or international awards. One is elite membership. One is major media or major trade media about you. One is academic journals that you've written, high salary, judge of the work of others. Okay, so what does that mean in tech, right? That means hackathons. That means being invited into a think tank or organization that may do the type of tech you're doing, AI, blockchain, whatever it is. It just has to have a threshold for it. You could be a Forbes 30 under 30, that would work there. We have a lot of Japanese clients that are part of a national body that sort of ties up with commerce and has organizations, those work. You can create things for yourself. When you start your own company, you quit being an H1B where you're buried in the middle of the company and you become a CEO or a CTO, right? Then you can go out and produce media about you and your company, right? So Bill Gates and Microsoft, right? Steve Jobs and Apple. You can be that person to your company. That media can be about you and your company. If you have a product you're developing, if you get it patented, right, then it's an original contribution. If you get that patent picked up by somebody in commerce, then it has a major significance, right? So we actually do a lot of planning to get people to that level. Now that O1 we're talking about is also the EB11. And if you remember earlier, no priority date problems for Indians, right? So you were on the H1B, you start your own company under the O. Now you can go to the EB1 with a little bit of help in that area. And then next thing you know, you are a vendor of your previous employer. You may get paid a lot more money. You may have a team. You may take your team with you and build your team underneath it and service that same project you were on. And it might be the thing that launches you, right? I've seen it so many times in this city. It's unbelievable. We've done it for a lot of companies where guys that they're shackled by their H1B. They go to the O because they can have multiple direct employers. They would have a contract with the previous employer, and then they would have a contract with their own company, right? And then they would little by little, just become, their company would grow, they raise money, they can put themselves out as a CEO. They don't have to worry about prevailing wage. So O's are fantastic if you can get there. And if you're not there, we can tell you what those thresholds you need to hit are. So wonderful visa if you can get. Great.
So, yeah, there are tons of questions. In fact, yeah.
No, they don't. We can tell you how to do it the right way.
Yeah, PhD and happens. That's perfect combination. Yeah.
Well, not the PhD, but the journal articles that you would publish while getting a PhD do.
Yeah.
Right. But look, here's the thing. Content is rare. Everybody wants content. So you pitch to somebody to write about you. The problem with the blogs are it's self. It's not a journal, so they don't count it as the authorship, and they don't count that as major media. But there's some really, really good publications that are looking for really good stuff. And there's always people that want to write about good products, and this city is full of those, right?
Yeah. So, I'll just repeat the question. What if you're eligible for ESTA, which is Electronic System for Travel Authorization?
Okay.
I have no idea what it is. Should you do that or should you go for B1, B2?
ESTA is going to require you to go out and come back, right? So that doesn't do anything other than give you 90 days of, if you do then apply for a visa and you get it, you'd have to go out again. So the B1, B2 is far superior to the ESTA. The ESTA will give you a status. The ESTA is a visa waiver that is for a number of different countries, not all of them. Those folks don't have to go to the consulate. They can just come in on an ESTA, but they can't work on it. They have to leave it 90 days. You can't extend it, and you can't change it to another visa.
So what are the timelines for ESTA?
90 days.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's the same as B1, so you're not really getting any.
Well, B1, B2 is 180, so it's half of a B1.
Oh, I mean, in terms
And
of
you
getting
can-
the approval for ESTA.
ESTA, you're gonna have to go out and come back in. You enter on an ESTA.
So what I mean is then you have to wait times in the embassy, or is it
No.
subject to that? or can you
There's
just
no
come back?
embassy. That's the advantage of, it's easier to get, say you're British, right? British has them. Britain has them. If you could just, you sign up for it, they give it to you, and then you enter on it without going to a consulate. So that's but you're now, you then leave at 90. So if you applied for a visa, you would apply for it as if you're out of the country. You then go to a consulate, then stamp it, come back.
So you can come back.
My son-in-law is a British citizen.
Yeah.
Last year, he couldn't enter the US.
Mm.
Okay, and you know what? Many years ago, some 8-10 years ago, I applied for his green card.
Ah,
And that damn thing was dangling in the
right.
system.
Yeah.
So they said,
Intent.
come back for a visa in March.
Yeah.
And they granted them a visa. And they said, that thing is still pending, take it off.
Right.
If you are not going to pursue an American green card,
Yeah.
take it off the system.
That concept's called intent and dual intent, right? So B1, B2s and ESTAs are not dual intent, H1Bs are. So you can apply for an H1B and a green card together, but not those other visas.
He was coming on the tourist visa.
I know, but because he had a green card, meaning he has intent to be a permanent resident, he couldn't enter on the visitor visa or ESTA because it. Right, yeah, no, that's what happened. Good point.
You actually touched upon the whole O visa. So there's a question here.
Okay.
You might have answered it, but I'll repeat it. What is process of applying O1 visa? Do the firm need to apply, or can we apply on our own?
You can apply, well, you can apply on your own. We talked about an agent-based one where you can apply under your own company, or as the O1, you could be a contractor, right? If you're extraordinary ability, but you would have to have employment. So if you don't have an agent to petition, then a company would be the petitioner or would have to be the petitioner, right? So you can't be a self-petitioner like an EB1, which is the green card version of that. But you could create a legal methodology where you have an agent that's applying for you and you as a company underneath it.
And you could act as that agent.
You would, yes, we'd be glad to.
Awesome. I'm going in random fashion, so sorry, there's no theme across my questions. If we have to relocate outside the US, what are the options to return back to US, given that your I-140 is approved and an employer is willing to sponsor your H-1B while you are outside US? Will you be subject to cap lottery again, or could you use I-140 to file a cap exempt H-1B to transfer to your new employer?
That's what that allows. So if you've had a cap, if you had an H before, unless you've used up all 6 years, then
The only thing is the consulates are closed. You
Yeah.
may not get an appointment.
those are hard, right? So that's an issue. You can pick consulates though, right? You don't have to go through your own country's consulate. We've done lots of people through Fiji, the Caribbean, get a little vacation, right?
There's always the upside, right? You're always the sun.
Well, you just gotta find answers, right? We brought an entire rugby league through Fiji last year. That was interesting.
Okay. Another random question. Is it considered authorized to stay if your 539 is pending for too long after grace period ends? I have no idea.
No, it's an excellent question. It's a very astute question. So your visas are valid pending for 240 days or until adjudicated. So it doesn't go forever, right? And in almost 30 years, I can remember once where they didn't get it done in 240 days. And we're like, oh, guess you gotta leave. And it had never happened. That's a very, very long time. It usually happens within there, but for whatever reason, they do have a barrier at 240. That usually means something's wrong, but we always suggest, it's a cool thing you may not know. Congressman, even if you're not an American citizen, you're a constituent, right? So you can look up your congressman, which either means a senator or a House of Representatives. This is federal, not state. And they have offices for immigration issues. And they have a direct line that it's called a congressional liaison line. So if your visa is pending for a very, very long time now, you should know, and you can look it up, is what are the processing times? Because the first thing they're going to do is look at the processing times, and those processing times may be 18 months for certain visas, right? They'll say it's still within it. They're not going to do anything. But if it's out of it, they'll make a phone call to the visa center, and many times the visa got lost or just got pulled off of somebody's desk. And that's where they're helpful. They will never get a visa approved for you unless you're a superstar that maybe donates lots of money to them, but they will go find lost visas and they'll get things off high center. So if the person that asked that question has a visa that's been pending forever, talk to your local congressman and you fill out a little form and then they check into it for you.
So I'll continue. Again, random questions. If I end up changing company, will I still be able to use my I-140 from company A to get 3-year H1B extension? I'm on my 6th year of H1B, so typical first year time renewal after 3-year case won't apply here.
Fantastic question, and there's good news for you. Your priority date is when you file your first I-140. If it gets approved, then that's your priority date forever. Now, with a lot of Indians, and the reason I'm using Indians, that there's only a few countries that have these really long priority dates, right? Philippines, China, Mexico sometimes, right? The rest of the world is what they call it, don't have those issues, right? So Indians are in a particular problem of company A applies for their green card 12 years from now, they're not in that job. They don't want to be, the company doesn't want them, whatever, but that priority date goes with you. So it means that you have to start the process over, meaning that you got to go through the perm filings and the I-140, but you get to count that priority date, right? Now that whole process start to finish is about 1.5 years, right? So if your priority date goes current or is close to current, you just have your new employer start that process again, and then you get to be treated like the rest of the world. So you get to take that date with
Something
you.
I've been asked before, maybe not relevant here, but something I've been curious. So a lot of people think that, maybe if they can move to like Dubai and then apply as a Dubai resident citizen, would that help? Or if you were born in India, you're stuck with the Indian sort of.
Fantastic question and unfair answer. It's where you're born. They actually look at both of those. So there's lots of Indians, Indians that have left India, they go to Canada, right? Which means as a Canadian citizen, they're actually eligible under the E2 visa, which means you can invest in a US company with only $100,000 as opposed to the EB5, which is now 900,000. So you can do that, but you're still born in India. So they still count for priority date purposes, your birth country. So you can have 2 citizenships, they're still looking at your birth country for priority dates, unfortunately.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, John. Thank you, Anil. If I move to different company and they start the whole I-140 process, LCA firm I-140 step, and if my husband ends up as my H4 dependent due to his circumstances, will he be able to get an EAD based on approved I-140 from previous company, Amazon in my case, or what?
So as an H4 with the originally approved I-140, he's eligible for the EAD under the H4. As if you were filing another green card, right, and you're going through that process, once you get to the I-140 stage again, and your priority date is now current to apply, he's going to get, and you're going to get another EAD off of that. By the time that EAD issues, you're pretty close to getting your full green card. So the relevant EAD is off of the H4. The other EAD will come. They don't supersede each other. They kind of coexist. It's a weird thing. But it takes about 6 to 8 months to do the EAD card off of the adjustment of status. And it takes about 6 to 8 months to do the adjustment of status. Weirdly, one comes and then the whole thing's over. So hope that answered your question.
Yeah. So I think we have about 20 minutes. What I would suggest is please summarize through the whole session, your thoughts, each one 5 minutes. Just take it in any direction. I think we covered a lot of ground. So starting with you, Lina, just
let me do a high level.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
I think good news, right? I mean, for anyone on the phone who was suffering in the last few days, you should know there's lots of good options that John outlined, lots of opportunities that Lina mentioned, right? So, and thank you for joining on a Friday afternoon. I'm sure everyone had other plans, but this was useful. On the visa side, right? most people are on H1, so your 60-day clock starts today or whenever you were terminated, but you can negotiate with your employer in extending that. We talked about how you can use your accrued PTO and potentially your severance package. So start thinking about how you go back to, and Alan is unfortunately not on the call, but he can help negotiate or get a good lawyer to negotiate those severance packages. Employers are also very flexible right now. They want to be supportive of whatever personal situations.
They don't want to pay the money back.
And they don't want to pay you. And plus the negative environment of having not done well with their employees.
What do they care between severance and keeping you on?
And it doesn't cost them financially one way or the other, so it shouldn't matter, right? There's opportunities where you can go out and go and hire and get hired by a consulting company and take the same project, could work out really well. You end up earning more, right? In most cases, and there are people like Lena who hire you and work with these projects.
Right.
So that's H1. You have lots of options, but very important that you understand the timelines. Put it on your calendar where your 60 days, work backwards, make sure you don't miss any of those timelines. Super important, right? And if you have questions, ask the immigration lawyers. If you're a spouse on H1 and you have been terminated, then great options for you, and especially if they filed 140, great options for you to convert into EAD in better. If you're running against the clock, you have the option of B1, B2 that extends your time period. Very easy process. Again, work on the timelines. Make sure you don't screw up on the timelines. Not too early. Don't file too early because it's not a long process, but not too late, not before you get out of the status. As Lena mentioned, great option for you to go back to your employer, especially these large companies, is to say, hey, can I go back, relocate for a year to India? If you have these projects, and if you're looking to hire people there, you know me already, employers will be very supportive of that. That may turn out to be a great win for you. You get 3 months of severance, work in India for a year, come back on an L1, and you are actually higher priority than you would be. You save 10 years on your green card process, EB1, and you save maybe 10 years of your life, right? On the assuming your life is tied to your green card. If you qualify, Owen is a great option. You can work for yourself. You can create your own company. You can lots of options. Again, very technical. You need to create the sort of paperwork for that. John, I know many of our clients have used your services for Owen successfully, so I would highly recommend John. Unlike a lot of immigration lawyers, other immigration lawyers I work with who just file things, he talks, he understands, he explains, and builds that package together, right? And that's critical for Owen, right? It's not just a bright line test. It's a lot of substance and art and creativity required.
Will actually give you what you can do to create that evidence, right? That's a legal thing to do. You just need, most people don't know to do it. They don't know to go do a hackathon and be the judge, which is a pretty easy thing to do, right? They don't know to put their product up for an award. There's lots of awards out there. So,
yeah. So I think, and also if they very quickly understand whether you don't qualify. So don't waste your time because you're struggling with a lot of information. So say, these are the things that I'm going to get out because of my friend got over, doesn't mean it applies to me. I'm not going to waste my time. So have that conversation early enough and clear your options, declutter all the options information you have.
another way to think about it is we will actually go through and tell you what things you can do. One of the things I love is people that come back 1 year, 3 years, 5 years later. I don't remember their name. They're like, John, you told me to do this. I went and did it. I'm like, oh my God, you did. Let's do that. Right? That's fantastic for me. So you may work in another H1B, you might do that, but you might be thinking, hey, I can get an EB1 here. And next thing you know, you've done it because most people just go to work. They don't think about promoting themselves that way. But yeah,
briefly mentioned investor visa. Maybe talk about that's 900K. If you are willing to invest 900K and talk about one qualification, you can still live and stay in the country. It might be a great time to make an investment. So
the EB5 has just kind of come back online. And what I mean by that is that it was subject to two things, some litigation that they'd raised it from $500,000 from the bottom level, which is what's called a target employment area. That's either rural or high unemployment. And so they're putting high unemployment in just little sectors of cities, right? So, and they thought that was abusing it because New York City was getting target employment and, places like Iowa weren't. And that's why Senator Grassley got so upset about it. He's an Iowa senator. It's like, hey, this was supposed to be for us and New York's getting all of our money that should be coming here. So it went under a lot of attack. And then they tried to change it. And then the Trump administration didn't really follow the laws a lot when it did things. They got pinged by the courts, and then it went back to 500,000. So they said, okay, we're just going to stop the regional center part of it. So the regional center's back up with a higher amount. So it went from 500 to 900, and from 1 million at the top to 1,050,000. So there's really not a big realm between the two, and we can talk about that. But if you invest that amount of money and create 10 jobs for Americans, even in your own project, your friend's project, or in a regional center, we could go on for days about this, so I'm going to be quick, then you can get a green card. Now, these green cards take about 2 years to adjudicate, but there's no priority date issues, right? You just got to wait to get through them, and you get a conditional one. And then in about 2 years, you got to say, okay, the money was still invested and the jobs are still created, and then they take the conditions off. So basically, you give your money away for about 5 years. And then there's different interest rates that these folks will negotiate with you on a case-by-case basis. That's the EB-5.
Can you start your own company, invest that money and hire
100%.
10 people?
Yeah, that way you're not losing the money and giving it to somebody else. So
Right.
we talk about that all the time. And we talk about when we look at folks in that situation, just people with money, people in companies, do you want to do the EB-5? Do you want to do the L1 to EB-1? Because you can bring your own company over here from India and set it up. Many have. Do you want to do the O1 to EB-1? You're a superstar in your company. So you got all these different options. All the EBs are green cards. That means employment based. So EB-1-1, EB-1-3, EB-5, EB-2, EB-3, all those are EBs. So there's different ways to get there. And what we like to do is just kind of tell you what your options are and help people make those decisions. So that's the investment thing.
Sorry, one more thing. If you've been laid off today and let's say you have the extra 900K, hopefully you have an area, you have equity lines, you can draw down on.
Right.
And I'm certainly looking for new clients. So start your own company.
Start your own company.
Start your own company. But what are the timelines? Do you have to do that within the 60 days?
Well,
And
there's
what are
no
what's
way
the
you
process?
can go straight to a green card from a laid off position. You're
No,
going to
but
have
trying
to
to
file.
survive, being in status. I mean, if you incorporate a company, put in 900K, are you within status
No.
after 61 days?
Because it's a green card. The green card doesn't get the status until you have it. So let's talk about who can do that. So I talked about the E2 for Indians that go to Canada. Okay. There are 33 countries that they don't include Canada, or don't include India, that have a treaty with the United States, right? So Indians that might be citizens of other countries could do this, right? Dual citizens, or those who used to be Indians and have given up their citizenship and gone to other countries can do this. But that's an E2, that's $100,000. It's a non-immigrant visa, like an H1 or an L or an O, but it can be renewed in perpetuity. As long as the company is viable, meaning it's providing goods or services, you can be on an E2. And there are people that stay on E2s because they don't want to go to a green card for tax purposes, right? So that's another one of those. And then that segues into the IEP, right? So the IEP is the International Entrepreneurial Parole. Parole, not visa. I'll explain the difference. So the IEP is, instead of putting your own money, it's getting somebody else's money, right? So if you can get an investor to invest it went from 250 to 267, right? It went up just a little bit. So I think it's $267,000, and they'd invested a little over 600,000 in the minimum of 2 other companies in the last 5 years, right? So it's a threshold. It's not the highest, but it has to be something. So these people have to invest it in 2 others. They have to be Americans, and they have to give you at least 267,000. If you do that, then you can get this IEP, and you have to sit in a position of power, right? So CEO, CTO, COO, but you can have 3 of them. And then those 3 have to have a minimum of 10% of the company, right? So this is where somebody can give that money. It can't be your parents. It really can't be a relative, and it has to be an American. But that's a new one that was invented by Obama, killed by Trump, reinitiated with no fanfare under Biden. We've done a number of them for your guys, and it's an exciting opportunity for the guys that come out of IIT, right? Or out of Cal or Stanford to be able to say, I'm not extraordinary ability yet, but I've got a good product and I can raise 260,000.
So let's make sure, because I don't know why I didn't think about bringing this earlier. I love this part, and unfortunately, surprisingly, a lot of immigration lawyers don't know about it.
No.
Which is, we work with the Obama administration at the very end, part of the immigration AI. At the very end, they ran out of time. They were going to push it. Trump killed it. Biden has approved it, but somehow nobody's talking about it, even including the administration. But this is, yes, this is called what I call founder's visa.
Yep.
I mean, there's lots of IEP, but call it a founder's visa. It's actually meant for you if you are if you start a company in the US, raise $267,000, which is not a big threshold,
Right.
from credible US investors. Credible meaning investors that have invested 600K in the last 5 years. Probably some people in the room. That automatically qualifies you to be able to, and this is your own company that you're starting, which will sort of sponsor your visa. And it's available. There's no quotas, there's no priority dates. And it allows you to stay for 1 year, can be extended over 3 years.
No, you can stay, you get 2.5 year tranches, so 5 years total. I think it's a much better version than the H1B for this reason. No prior, no minimum wage, no prevailing wage. You get to be the leader of your company, right? What happens in H1Bs, you got these guys who want to run their companies and then they call themselves the developer and they have to have a pseudo COO because they can't be COOs because prevailing wage is too high, right? They're going to pay themselves $250,000 a year in a startup, and they've only raised $250,000. It doesn't make any sense, right? So this allows them to not have to worry about that, hold themselves out as the CEO, COO, and they could bring 2 other guys with them, right? And not only that, what I like about it is if we can get them in on IEPs, then we can line them up to do the EB1 green cards, right? So, well, we'll go right from IEP to the EB1 instead of the O1 to the EB1. It's similar criteria, right? So now that you're the CEO, you can get press for yourself in the company where you can't be buried as the developer, right? The guy that's the developer that owns his own company that's hiding under the H1B has to pretend he's not the CEO, right? Or if they think you're the CEO, they're going to say, you didn't get paid the prevailing wage, negate your whole company and do this. So it's wonderful for that. I really expect the IEP to be really embraced by India. It hasn't because none of
Somehow John and I are the only ones shouting from the rooftop. Nobody else here.
isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
For moonlighting.
Yeah.
While working for somebody else.
Bingo. Yeah.
And when
Illegally.
an idea which gets traction.
Yeah.
See, the same H visa, you belong to, you work for that company. What do they come back and say the IP is mine?
No, of course, and that's something we deal with all the time.
I bet it happens more times than it doesn't.
No, we deal with that every day.
They have told us that policy. From the part of the Stanford student or whatever, they have to get a waiver from Stanford.
That's right.
They owe us nothing, or they are willing to pay us an IP.
Right?
IP, they don't need, we'll give them a waiver to this thing. So we see enforcement.
So again, going.
A lot of agencies guys have asked us, and we got a lot of agencies guys who want to do startups, and we say, you know what, you can't own the IP.
Right.
Somebody else.
So going back to what we started at the top, this is good news. It could actually be better for you than not being laid off. If this is something, yeah, so let's talk. So I want to summarize that. So if you have been thinking about, and if you've been working at Google, Meta, you've got to be thinking about starting your own company. You must know you can build something better than what Meta or Google and all that. Everyone. So this is your opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
Organizations like IIT startups should actually look at it as a real opportunity to fund these companies.
And our answer to them is no, because.
No, but this IEP, what I call the founder's visa, allows us to do it. Yes.
Anil, can you please help and tell that how many investors are required and what's the percentage? I think it's a great visa which people should know.
Yeah, no, this bears repeating. Okay, so it only requires one investor. That one investor needs to be an experienced investor. What that means is not the same as what we look at in SEC filings. An experienced investor has a very specific definition under that. That investor has invested. It's a little over 600,000 because it goes up every year, right? So it's a little over 600,000 in 2 different startups in the last 5 years. There's the definition of the investor, right? Which can be one guy. I think it's more of an angel than it's a VC, right? I think the VCs want $20 million projects. The angels want a 260 or somebody in between, right? Okay, so that, but it has to be an American. There needs to be a passport. And they have to have done that thing. Now, the 2 companies they've invested in have to have created a minimum of 5 jobs or annual revenues of 100,000, right? So again, there's a threshold. It can't just be, I've started a company. and I put some money in it. So they're putting these little thresholds in here, which irritates some people, but it meets them. It's met them on the two that you've sent us, right? And the Inventus financial arm invested in these companies like, hey, this works perfectly, right? And so then the individuals that are to be the visa holders or the parole holders, and I'll talk about the difference of a parole and a visa. They're very similar, but a little bit different. So the beneficiaries of this, you can have 3 of them, right, for one company. So one $267,000 investment can have the CEO, CTO, COO, or whatever, right? Chief architect, whatever they want to be. Now, each of those people that are going to be recipients of that visa have to have a minimum of 10% in the company. Okay. Now, I have talked to this on behalf of the beneficiaries, or mostly the people here, but I've also talked to the potential investors, right? And so guys that are in India or are from India that are here that have a little bit of money and like, look, I know my friend's son, and we'd like to set him up in his own company. I'll invest the money. I'll take 90% of it. We'll give them 10%. I'll mentor him to start his own company. You can do it like that, right? So I see this visa. You know, the H1B is owned by India. 70% of H1Bs go to tech companies. 70% of those are Indian tech companies, right? This is what's happening right now. But the IEP will be taken there too, because it's where we see, what I see from the outside looking in is we're going to more and more innovators and entrepreneurs.
So Manish, to your point, we've actually talked about,
And that's the IIT graduates. Yeah.
yes.
All the.
No, we should talk about it as an organization, because John and I have talked about creating a fund that can actually, it's a great opportunity to, because there's talent and the thresholds are not that high.
Right.
Create a fund, bring these companies, set up the companies.
Totally.
I get more business, and we invest, and there's no limitation.
There are a lot of jobs.
Right.
Hesitate when a guy's got an H1.
Right.
And
Not supposed to be doing it.
themselves are not
You know,
sure.
if we are advising VCs, we would tell them, let's evaluate when they were working for a Meta or a Google, and that is an issue. That's absolutely an issue, especially if it's the same line of business.
So, you know, to that
For our
point,
startups.
yeah, to that point, can you give an example of actually some companies which launched like this?
So the limitation is this brand new. So we filed a few, and John will talk about where we are in terms of the process.
So I want to talk about that because
Actually, I have a recommendation. I actually think this is a serious and big enough topic that there needs to be another session
let's do that.
dedicated to this,
Yeah.
because this is
IIT
this
should
is
take leadership
useful
of that.
to the broader community at IIT, not just people who have
So,
recently got their
Lena,
jobs.
great point. I think because we are
Yeah.
touching the
Yeah.
5 PM mark, and we should not exceed that.
Another session.
We'll do another session.
I want to set the table for it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I went to Cal, right? And I'm back out here in my hometown, College, Stanford, and, you know, Indian graduates of these American schools are great people for IEPs. But the other one is IIT, right? IIT kids coming out of India,
Largest unicorn builders in the world.
100%.
Not Stanford.
See, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, Harvard.
Yeah. It's fantastic, but that's my point, right? So what I've seen as I've been doing immigration for 30 years is that the innovators are coming out of India, and that's why we're friends, right? So,
What? I thought you liked me.
well, I love you, but what Anil has doing is he's finding these guys in his company in India, and I'm on my way back to India on December 25th, and he's finding these guys in India that are coming out of IIT. He's inviting them over here. We're putting them on these IEPs, right? We're doing it hit and miss by looking at them. We need to make it a process, right? We need to get the numbers of the IIPs up to the numbers of the H1Bs, right? We need to make it a machine. And that's where your organization can do this.
That's an item.
They've got, startups in India who want to target the US market and want to be presented.
And we should do a session on that. But what are the limitations right now? What are we seeing sort of, what are
The problem of the IEP is this, and this is why it's a parole, not a visa. So you get it approved by USCIS. You then have to go out to the consulate. You can't change the status. There's no premium processing for it. And then the border has the last call. So usually the border just says, come on through. Now they get to sit there and go, I don't know, right? And then you also got to prove why you're your spouse and kids are relevant, which is an easy standard, but it's still a standard we got to prove. So it's a little weird, this visa, right? And the other weird part about it, it's adjudicated by the same people that do the EB-5s. Now, I do a lot of EB-5s. I've never lost an EB-5, but these guys are tough. Right? And so what we're doing is building EB-5 business plans under the matter of O case, right, on making sure that it hits these things. And that's why I think some other attorneys are afraid of this visa and they're stumbling on it. And they're taking about a year to get, right? So it would be a lot better if there was premium processing like the L, they could get them in a couple of weeks. So it's a little bit of a longer term, but I think what it does is it's a window that didn't exist. It's below the O, right? What they invented it is they have the national interest waiver, EB-2, wasn't being used enough. So the Biden administration says, we want a non-immigrant visa version. When it was going through before, it was going to be an EB-6. It was going to be a green card. So instead of making it the EB-6, they made it this IEB, made it kind of weird and funky. But if we look at it, instead of saying, does this guy meet it or does this woman meet it? Let's recruit people that meet it. Let's find the unicorns out of IIT. Hey, say, here's the money. Here's the immigration process. You're going to come in. He's going to incorporate you. We're going to introduce you to more funding in the United States. And there you go. I think if you get it into that sort of process, you'll bring lots and lots and lots of good companies over here.
I think cross-border. Yeah, where non-mobility is also involved.
Yeah.
And they want us to help these guys from India, Indian startups.
Yeah.
Come to the US.
Yeah.
They're already, operational there.
Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap up, Lena.
Yeah.
Last
Yeah.
one.
Take a minute or two because we are at 5 p.m. and
Okay.
yeah.
Wait, I mean, if you want to have the whole alphabet soup of visas, talk to these two guys. If you are just looking for how do I find a new employer, how do I work with the same company that I was working with as a consultant, or how do I connect with people that have jobs out there, reach out to me and I can.
The contact.
My contact is going to be.
We'll
Yeah.
provide it. Yeah.
My contact. will
Yeah.
be-
Actually, on that note, yeah, and we'll add all the contacts. In fact, folks are asking for contact for Ellen Foss. So we give all the information to everyone. So I think we should wrap up. So I just want to do a quick 1 minute closing. Thank you all for joining on Friday afternoon. Adversity is what, when we face adversity, that defines us as individual. And when we get through on the other side, it refines us. And all of folks here are going to get through the other side and get refined through this experience. Having clarity from brilliant people like, John, Anil, Lena, and others helps all of us get that clarity. So we want to thank these individuals for sparing their time with us. We want to thank IIT Bay Area Alumni Association for helping organize this. And with that, please engage on LinkedIn. We'll provide more information and this session will be recorded. Thank you again for everyone who joined in the room and online. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend and you will end up in an amazing place within 6 months or less, guaranteed.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Session.
Thank you.
Good job.